Hi, hello. I kind of died for a long time. Um, but uh, like I said I was going to do, next I was going to cover the spheres of might, how to actually use them. Um, so, like in the last video, I was covering just the general idea of what the system itself is about. Um, Obviously, you got to have some operating information to uh, use the system itself more competently. Um, So the spheres, they're combat spheres. The alchemy sphere, barroom sphere, so on and so forth, as I was describing in the last video. Those are different spheres. Those are different things that you can specialize in. Of course, you can take several spheres, so on and so forth. It's just these are the major types of combat that you'd be focusing in, be it like focusing on bleeding your enemies or alchemical combat or various types of fighting with your fists. Once you spend, so as it goes and describes here, normally you get a specific amount of talents determined by a class. So this would be being like an adept, proficient, or I think there's one other type of practitioner. But there's like three different types of practitioners based on um, what how focused in their different fields they are. Like the conscript class, they're as it states here, expert combatant. So expert's the last one. So it's adept, expert, and proficient, where they gain one every level. I think proficient they gain one. mm, I think that's off the blacks. That you can look at the blacksmith for that example. No, there's a scholar, one of the two. I don't know. I don't remember the other one off the top of my head. Proficient is a scholar where they gain half. So there's another one somewhere. So I don't know. I don't know off the top of my head. But then there's a third one. So you have one of the three. Um, you would every time you gain a talent, you take one of the talents from one of the spheres, such as let's go look at uh, Barmer Sphere, for example. There's a list of different talents you can take, and they have different flavors. So the base, when you take a sphere itself, you gain a basic ability from each sphere. So, for example, from Barroom Sphere, you gain a brutal brutal breaker, which gives you some bonuses to using improvised weapons because Barroom Sphere is around using improvised weapons and drinking. And then Hard Drinker goes and helps you with destroying things and increasing your tolerance to drinking for the purposes of your sphere effects. You would take one talent. These are talents uh, either from this sphere or other spheres, so on and so forth, at each level. Once you take it, just like any other class feature, you cannot change it unless you retrain it, which would be the same as a feat being retrained, as it states right here. Um, Otherwise, you can get a few extra feats if you take it through a few extra talents if you take it through extra combat talent feat or other things like that. But those are like the major um, methods. The class is the major method of getting your talents. Spheres DC, it's like any other class DC. It's based off your, for a lot of martial things, it's based off BAB plus your practitioner modifier, which is dependent on your class. Like the scholar, I think, are primarily in intelligence. Yeah, they have their intelligence as their practitioner modifier. Other ones have different ones, but it's based on whatever class is your key stat. Yeah, here. Expert, adept, proficient. Proficient is the low tier, adept is middle, and then three quarters, and then half caster, three quarter, full progression. Uh, you can take so um, if you're not a Spheres of Might class, you can gain some progression of it through exchanging certain feats at certain levels to gain a progression path. So um, by exchanging feats, um, as it states here, you exchange the ones at these levels to gain the progression path of the type. So if you're exchanging 1, 5, 9, 13, 17, you'd then gain proficient path. And same with the adept. Um, those are the major one. That's the major note there. Um, and looks like it doesn't apply to high casters doing this way, so you can't do it, for example, with like an incanter or another like mage class that way. But as in a full like 0 to 20 progression that way, but you can do it with the other ones. Um, yeah. Um, um, classes whose maximum spell level would be 4, so low casters would be can trade for proficient, adept, and yeah. Um, terminology related to the spheres associated feat is a big one. With the spheres having talents that are related to different core rule set feats, such as improvised weapon mastery, um, there's going to be feats that you wouldn't be able to take in conjunction with talents to get double the benefits. An example of this, like I was just pointing out, was the Barroom Expert. Um, it gives you these effects, but because it is associated with the improvised weapon mastery, it's not suggested to be able to stack, but you can use those talents that are associated with feats for any prerequisites that normally would be needed for them. So if something has prerequisite of improvised weapon mastery, you then can use the Barroom Expert as a prerequisite for it. Attack actions, if you play Pathfinder, you know their standard action attack, battered condition. There are various different things in the spheres of might that might give you the ability to give the battered condition to an enemy. As it states here, it imposes -2 to the CMD and prevents them from making a attack of opportunity up when you're performing a combat maneuver. This is useful for some things in this system as well, but it's generally a nice thing to have just for, your combat maneuvers, as this is a martial system. It's going to be heavy on that. Um, as it states, there's a few ways to clear it, but usually you want to keep that there. Expend, you have a resource called Martial Focus. Normally you'd have one at most times, but when you expend it, uh, you won't be able to gain any benefits that require Martial Focus until you do something that regains it. Which most spheres have some way to regain it. Be it athletics, I think it requires you to move a bit. Barroom sphere, you can drink as a move action to regain it, that sort of thing. Then there's legendary talents. At the bottom of each sphere page, you can see these. These are supposed to be like uh, things for like Heroes of Legend type stuff. For example, Eternal Buzz. Like it's the sort of thing that you'd find in media where like for like drunken masters type things, where you are just so drunk at all times that you don't need to drink to get drunk anymore in this case. And basically your blood alcohol content's high enough that it's just an alcoholic beverage itself. It, there's various different uh, uh, legendary talents between each sphere. Magic in the Spirits is another example. You gain bonuses to weapons as you get drunk, which is also interesting. Um, Main hand, off hand, same sort of thing as normal. I already went into martial focus. Basically, if you have some way to get talents or progression, you can get martial focus to use those. Additionally, whenever you make a fortitude or reflex save, you can then treat it as a 13 instead of take 10 by expending your martial focus. Um, yeah, you keep it until you go to sleep, become unconscious, or expend your focus. Usually, you regain it from either talent or at the beginning of the day, usually. Um, because yeah, no, it's after a minute of rest, so it's after combat usually, or right as you wake up, doing your daily preparation type stuff, or as your companions are. Martial traditions are a big thing. I'll go into those in the next video. Um, they're usually it's kind of indicating what your starting abilities as you're starting at level 1 would be as a martial practitioner. They give you, I think, around 4 talents and a sphere to work with, or 3 talents and 2 spheres to work with. If I remember correctly, I'll have to go look at it in a moment again. There's some ways to gain a martial tradition even if you're not normally a practitioner. Again, as we stated, the practitioners are those who got progression paths in the system. Practitioner modifier again is your key stat for each of the classes in the system. Special attack action again, stances just like in normal Pathfinder are also stances requiring swift actions to get into. Um, there are some optional rules here that can be used. A lot of the stuff down here is just focused on additional rules that optional rule systems and so on. Um, if you guys want me to go into that further, I can, but I think I'm gonna call it here. Um, have a good night. I'll see you at some point when I update you on the martial contract. Not martial contracts, the martial traditions. See ya.